I don't know if you know this, but FNAF was a big hit, and we're getting a movie like today by the time this is up. And we know it's a big hit because the rights for the movie got signed off after the first 2 games. But really, the work on the film we're actually getting didn't happen until quite recently. But coincidentally, or not so to FNAF's popularity, in the time we've been waiting, a few people have decided to make their own FNAF movie with the Banana Splits and Nicolas Cage. So I'm reviewing the Banana Splits movie and Willy's Wonderland, comparing them between the two and how they definitely weren't inspired by Five Nights at Fun. I will be giving out some spoilers as I want to talk about some of the deaths, and the plots usually are pretty straightforward, but I do want people to be able to watch the movies themselves, so I'm not going to entirely recap the plots. Starting in 2019, we got the Banana Splits movie, a Warner Brothers property, which is interesting because they were the first ones to fumble the bag with the FNAF movie. The original Banana Splits was a live-action variety show in the late 60s where there would be costume characters doing little skits in between cartoons. These characters being used in such a drastic fashion from their origins isn't even entirely new, as 2 years prior to this they were featured in a crossover comic with The Suicide Squad. In this movie, the main cast features around a family, with Harley the little boy main character being a super fan of Snorky the elephant. And in this reality, the Banana Splits clearly lasted more than 2 seasons and is still going. That is, until Harley goes to be part of the studio audience with his family for his birthday, the day the show gets cancelled. Also different from the real show is that the costume characters are completely robotic and not just actors in suits. So when the main mechanic finds this out, supposedly there's just a failure in the software update, but I'm not entirely sure it wasn't intentional on his part because the splits start attacking. Now, I don't watch a lot of horror movies at all, so some of my criticisms might just be things you have to deal with when watching these kind of movies, and there was definitely a lot of stupid people doing stupid things, like screaming when they were hiding actively just because they saw some parts. Personally, I think the story is quite a weak point, as there's a lot of time spent on family drama between the mother and father, and 2 of the teenage characters have an awkward romance for, no reason. Some of the action is based on the actual show, of course, like their little cars, and there's an obstacle course segment I really liked. Though the cartoons weren't really in it, I'm pretty sure. The DVD I have has a behind-the-scenes thing, and something they pointed out was that they hired dancers to play the splits, which was a really good call because my suspension of disbelief was held and I didn't think about them being people in costumes during the film at all. Meanwhile, the acting itself was just okay. I think maybe there was a couple people who were obviously not as good as the others, but it was fine. I don't know pretty much anything about cinematography, but I think everything looked good except for a few deaths, one of which they are apparently extremely proud of, and I hated, so spoilers for the first one. A deliberately annoying character has one of those comically large lollipops shoved down their throat, and it didn't, break the throat or split it at all. It's just a big lollipop in his neck, and looking back at it, the lollipop isn't even actually that big, so it could be possible, but I just don't think we're like snakes or seagulls and there should have been something there. There is a fair amount of gore in this movie, and like I said, most looks fine, but there was also a bit where I could see someone's insides and it looked a bit more like a carved out cake than what I think that's meant to look like. But the rest, it's basically a straight generic horror that used the animatronic idea to have costume robots made for entertaining kids to go killer, but combined the IP in ways to use the TV show studio and some of the things from the original show. From watching behind the scenes and just looking at the movie, it's obviously had care put into it and they had fun making it, but the unnecessary story threads really just felt like they were put in to fill time. And there was also a really silly sequel hook which I won't spoil. I think it's interesting, and I suppose there's not much else you can do with such a short-lived product of its time. Now, Willy's Wonderland, on the other hand, came out in 2021, starring Nicolas Cage, who does not say a single word the entire movie. This one is a lot more obviously not FNAF-like because it's set in a children's diner that would host birthday parties with an animatronic band as entertainment. In this, our unnamed hero gets set up and told that if he cleans the defunct Willy's Wonderland overnight, they will pay to repair his tyres that supposedly cost $1,000 to fix, and that they definitely didn't pop themselves. So semi-spoilers to the backstory because they exposition this out part way. The gist of this one is instead of the animatronics being possessed by the souls of the victims, they're actually the souls of the killers. Also, they talk, which is just a little weird. It's just things like, hee hee, I'm gonna eat you, and some swears. It also has some generic things to check off, like the gang of teenagers or young adults, I'm not sure how old they're supposed to be, endangering themselves, and one of them looking like a stereotypical rural hooker, and the whole small town keeps a dark secret and lures people to their death to save themselves thing. But that's not really why you're watching this. The janitor, as he's called in the credits, is a great character who is shown to definitely not drink and drive, but he could probably put down the pot. And unlike many victims of such a circumstance, his first reaction to a moving animatronic is to poke it a few times, and to retaliate against anyone that picks a fight with him. The movie isn't serious at all, as you can tell by the main character. It's more of an action film that uses basic horror things and the premise as it's set up, but there's little tension or scare to be had. I think it's supposed to be funny, but it's not trying too hard to do that. Say the two teens go into a closed room to hook up and get killed because, duh, happens, but nobody makes a smart remark about it. Most of any humour revolves around the most done man in the world, who is largely impassive, aside from pinball. Also, duct tapes his wounds. I'm trying not to go too much into him since he's the main appeal of the film. The animatronic designs are really cool, and definitely look, well, I was gonna say they look like they're from the time they're set, but apparently in this story they were created in 1996, so I think maybe their design was just a touch outdated at that point, which wouldn't be the outside of the norm for something being made for children. They also came up with more creative ideas and not just using animals, although that does mean the siren definitely didn't seem robotic at all, because she was just a skin suit and a headpiece. And the ostrich was the one that looked the most not human because he was actually a puppet. The colour grading and camera shots kind of got to me at first, but it's just quite stylistic. Though the GoPro on the gorilla choking part looked a bit funny. The movie is significantly less gory than the banana splits. It was mostly just blood splashes. Willy's Wonderland is supposedly not FNAF inspired and was instead thought of based on a real arcade with animatronics, which could very well be true and fair, since Freddy's is also based on the uncanny creep factor these animatronics bring. The stated reason for the not talking was that originally the writer was going to play the main character since it started out especially low budget, but once they got Nick Cage onto the project, they decided to completely omit lines because he thought it would be a fun acting challenge. Of course, the FNAF movie isn't out while I'm recording right now, so I can't rank them all on that, but I do find it interesting that because of the wait we got these two movies. Of the two, I'd obviously recommend Willy's Wonderland more, but I did still feel like the Banana Splits movie was worth watching at least once. Also, if by some miracle this video gets 100 likes by Thursday evening Australian time, I will watch the movie on opening day and review it on Friday. Though I'm kind of hoping not because I have a lot more games coverage to get back to. Thanks for watching, and I'll see ya. Bye.